Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We'll just give it a couple of seconds before we get started. You can see all of our panelists here, and we'll get to introductions in just a minute. That pregnant pause before we get going. All right. Why don't I kick it off? So, SAMPS is a community of sales and marketing professionals who work specifically in the life sciences, and we exist to make sure our craft gets the attention it deserves through networking and education events like this one. If you're new here, welcome, and thanks for joining us. You found your people to learn and network with. If you've been part of the community for a while, we're glad you're back. I'm Jasmine Gray, a member of the SAMPS board, and I'll be facilitating today's panel discussion. While I do have some prepared questions for our panelists, I want to encourage all of you to submit your questions in the Q&A box when you get a chance, and we'll try and address as many of your questions as we go along. Our panelists are using AI across applications in market messaging, workflow automation, sales enablement, synthetic buyer research, and word of mouth strategy. I'd like to welcome our panelists Anne Brine, Nick Clare, Sarah Neely, and Matt Wilkinson. And let's start off by asking each of you to please introduce yourself, and we'll start with Anne. And can you also give us one AI use case you've added to your workflow recently?
Okay. Hi, hello everybody. My name's Anne Brine. I work for Promega UK and I'm based in Southampton, England. As you can see out the back, I'm in a very green and pleasant part of the country down in Southampton. I've been with Promega for 8.5 years. Whilst I did higher level sciences at school, I have a very varied career, and I came to Promega from professional services in the defence industry. So I brought some different skills into the business. For me, I've always been an early technology adopter. I did my first website in 1995, so I've actually clocked up 30 years in digital marketing, which always surprises me. But the real difference that AI has made to us, we've been using ChatGPT now probably for about 2.5, 3 years, is on the reporting side of our business, allowing us to look at data, slice and dice that data to get more intelligence. And what it's also done is set us on a path of continuous improvement, more so than we've ever done before, because by creating a knowledge layer within our enterprise edition of ChatGPT, we can see where the gaps are, so we can encourage our colleagues to fill those data gaps. So that's what I would say has been the biggest push, especially in the last 6 to 12 months with me and my role within Promega.
Super, thanks, Anne. Matt, over to you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Wilkinson. I'm the CEO of Striven, and we're based both in the UK and in the US. I'm somewhat north of Anne, somewhere between London and Brighton in the middle of the Ashdown Forest. I've been using, I can't sort of think about the number of things I'm using AI to do these days, from agentically updating schema markup on the website to enhance AI discoverability and make sure that all of those key identity signals are pointing in exactly the same direction and consistent. But I think my favorite example recently was I have synthetic customers. It's kind of my big thing that I'm really enjoying doing, and I have a book coming out soon. So shameless plug for that. And last week I put a test together, front covers. I gave them to the synthetic customers, and I also ran a LinkedIn poll as well. And what was really interesting was just looking at how similar those results came out. And what both of them showed me was that for the audience for my book, the three that I put forward probably were getting close, but they weren't there. And we saw that both in the synthetic customers and in the LinkedIn results. But then we ran a test. We took those results, and I went back to my designer, Jim McLeod, author of the Visual Marketer, and he went off and we created a few new images, and one of those did win my synthetic customer panel. So I had no teasers about what that's going to look like. I'm going to keep that under wraps, but that was a really fun use case to see sort of them arguing over what the cover should look like.
Yeah, that's quite the human version of AI there with arguments. Thanks, Matt. Nick, over to you.
So a bit like Matt, it's hard to discuss what AI workflow I want to talk about. But to start with a bit about me, I'm also in the UK and a bit further north than Matt. I'm even closer to London, so just about 20 miles outside. Um, my background is actually I worked in the lab for pharma and biotech for like 17 years, so deep in the science. Before then, going to spend a decade in commercial, everything from a technical specialist through to CBO, mainly on the sales side of focus, but also heavily involved in marketing because in my mind they're just a blurry line. Um, Before starting Succession, and Succession Bio is a company that specializes in lead generation services using AI tools for biotech and life sciences, as well as sales training. Um, and to pick a workflow in the last 90 days is quite difficult because in the last 90 days, we've probably made sure that Claude Code or Codex touches every single process in our business so that it's embedded in part of the workflow, like we have digital colleagues that help out on part of the process, AI agents that do specific things, provide reports. One of the things I particularly enjoy, like each person in our company has a particular passion for a side of the AI. I really like where we can build scientific context to aid our processes. So one of the things I built recently was a skill within Claude that allowed a set of agents to go off and review any client I'm working with, look for every subject area they have, and become the equivalent of like 5 years postdoc expert in that scientific area. Come back and build me a knowledge base for that client. So now that everything I do has context around their scientific knowledge. And I think that's really important because we'll probably get into it a bit more, but AI without context gives surface level results. So building context around all stages of your workflow is important. But yeah, that's the thing I did recently that I really enjoyed.
Super. Thanks, Nick. And over to you, Sarah.
Thank you. Well, Matt, I am looking forward to your book. So I'm excited to hear that a cover has been selected. My background is in marketing. I am not a scientist. Have been working in experiential marketing for 20 plus years. I started my career with Red Bull's launch in the US. So it was a pretty exciting time to be able to be part of that brand. And that team learned a lot of great lessons about how to build community around a brand, to build conversation around a brand, and to scale those conversations. And today I am working in how to connect those human conversations to a digital footprint that's visible to AI. I am the vice president of strategy at a word of mouth focused agency called Fizz. And I've also founded my own consultancy around that connection between human conversation and AI visibility. And like Matt and Nick were saying, it's hard to identify just one way that I'm using AI in my workflow. But a conversation that I had last week comes to mind. I am a curious person. I have lots of projects going on, and AI helps me to keep those conversations moving forward so that I can be working on multiple projects at once in a way that allows me to actually be effective instead of just jumping from one project to the next. So having multiple projects in Claude that I can jump into as an idea or a thought comes to me and have those projects be working on my behalf and keep the work moving forward while I shift gears to work on something else has been pretty exciting.
So your LLM of choice is Claude, or do you use a variety?
I mean, I use a variety, but I would definitely consider Claude to be my most effective and most favorite child.
Cool. Well, we're going to want to hear more about that and why that is. To kick us off, Anne, as you mentioned, you've been with Promega over 8 years. And you've watched AI move from individual curiosity, probably within the company, to something that touches the whole organization. What's that shift look like from where you sit in marketing, and where's the biggest commercial impact shown up?
Okay, so this is purely from my perspective as a marketer. We're a very big organization. I sit in the UK. We have our parent company in the US. I think we are very different, and a lot of businesses and individuals in the life science industry know that we're very different. We're led by a very entrepreneurial leader. And it was his vision of AI that really came into our world probably about 3 years ago now. If you go onto the OpenAI ChatGPT website, you'll see a really interesting case study about us and how we've used it across the business. That case study is actually probably about 2 years old now, so things have really moved on in that time. I don't think it was very much individual curiosity, other than Bill and Poncho, our director of our VP of R&D. They were the original ones who said, right, actually, this is going to change. We were all immersed in ChatGPT and licenses. Everybody had it from day one, which even now I go and talk to my peers in other industries, and my kids are university age, and how they're using AI. And we're streets ahead of them. And it still quite shocks me, because we are actively encouraged to use AI as a welcoming partner, as a critical partner, to look at areas of our work that can be done quicker, more efficiently, to a better quality. That said, we are using those main engines. So we were on ChatGPT, we're moving over to Claude now. But as a marketer, I see probably 10 to 15 different tools that have AI embedded in them. And I think as a marketer, I don't want to become a programmer. I had to do programming 30 years ago to build websites. And over the period of probably between 95 and 2000, WYSIWYG editors came in. You could build a website in literally an hour. You could do all the metadata, everything like that. So we're used to that world where we're using marketing tools. And I was actually on another webinar a couple of months ago, and they put up this grid of all the different tools. I thought, yeah, actually we're using 10 to 15 of those. We're using things like Canva, Adobe, Asana. They all have AI embedded in them. So it's actually using those products on steroids now. I think there certainly is a place. We have lots of people in the business who make GPTs. My team are making them all the time. But it's getting that balance between so much time going on to creating artifacts or custom GPTs versus you have something already there that you can use. And I would say that's the main thing for us. We're actively encouraged to look at all those different tools and how we can gain that personal and team efficiency to move forward. And it has been such a fundamental change in the last 3 to 4 years.
I think
Sorry, go ahead, Nick.
I was going to say, just to add on to some important things you said, Anne, is that the varying tools that are out there are obviously specialists, and it's like you don't have to then go code until train Claude how to do it. So a lot of people now are using Claude like that orchestrator and the generalist, and then you connect these tools to it. So Canva has a API or an MCP, so you can connect Claude to it, and then you can use Claude as your minion to go do the jobs, right? And I think something else you said that we're trying to instill at Succession is freedom for our team to play, because I think this is such an important time to just mess about with tools and see which ones you like, which ones work, which ones don't work, that you need to, and this must be much harder in a large company like Promega, but give your staff that freedom to play and come back with ideas, because none of this is locked in stone yet.
Yeah, and we're actively encouraged to do that. And I think further on we'll come through the discussion that this is completely business transformation, and managing that transformation is such a fundamental part of the process. And I was at an event last week, and the software tool is a major tool that we use, we're saying you have to keep thinking about your people and continuous training of them. You can't just do one lot of training and think everybody gets it, because everybody learns at different speeds. Everybody embraces. We have some fantastic champions of AI in our business, and it's trying to use them almost as train the trainers to spread that message out, whilst having that consistent training message across the business.
Mm-hmm. So we have a question here from one of our attendees. How about hooking the tools up to each other to 2x check each other to get a better outcome? Do you have any specific workflows to recommend for any specific tasks?
I don't specifically. One of the others in the team might do. I know that we're using various different connectors between different packages, and that's really where they come into their own. We would have had a dozen data scientists 5 years ago having a request. I worked in utilities before I came to Promega, and I know BI requests took 6 weeks to go through the system. Now with things like Power BI and Claude and ChatGPT, you can become your own data analyst very quickly and speedily. And I think that's where organizations like Nick and Matt's organizations will be looking at that underpinning technology for those organizations that don't have their own IT resource. I had a graduate intern in for 6 months who had come from life science. She'd worked for the Institute of Cancer Research in London, had gone out of bench science back and did a degree in AI. And she was something quite unique 2 years ago. There weren't many people doing it. The other people on her course were computer scientists. And I said to her that I thought her lecturer would actually have a hard time marking her dissertation because it was on using AI for breast cancer research. And it was so above the normal IT realm. And she was snapped up as soon as she left us after the internship, and she went into large language models. And yeah, it's just those skills. That's what people need at the moment.
I would say in answer to Heather's question that often I'm using a tool like Perplexity to gather information, and then using a project in Claude to check against what I already know or believe, or the information that's specific to a certain client or project. And I would imagine that Matt probably could chime in on how he uses his synthetic customers in the same way. So it is taking the facts that I am gathering and in research, and then using the Claude tools to ask, where does this align? Where does this disagree? What should I do further research into because it doesn't match the other information that I have? So I'm usually asking it to identify places that align and don't align. And that's been a pretty effective way to identify places where I need to do further checking. I hope that helps answer, but I'm going to throw it to Matt because I know you've probably got some thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I've been doing quite a lot with a number of different models and tools. So often it's linking things together in series. To work through a workflow, you need to create a prompt, then you want to put that prompt somewhere else. And, whether that's to create, get Claude to create a prompt to chuck into the API in OpenAI to create an image. And then, whether you take that image and put it manually into a video generator and use those sorts of tools. So creating those workflows where you go from here's some text all the way through to, here's a video. And actually talking about synthetic customers, I did that where they actually envisaged who they were and, in terms of an image, and then move that through so they got them to prompt. And, that was quite a fun experiment to go through that journey. But I think that the question was asking sort of using two models to check each other's work. So I've done that a bit more in a more automated manner, creating some of the tools where we're creating synthetic customers that people can access via an MCP server, which is the model context protocol. So you just use a connector, whether it's in ChatGPT or in Claude. So be actually just check the code and try and find vulnerabilities there. But probably the easiest use case was creating a comparative project using a set of scientific data in ChatGPT and a set of scientific data in Claude. So two different projects, but the same context. So coming back to what Nick said about kind of context engineering. And then getting Claude to use that to create a white paper. This is for a client called Nanocrin, a small startup, a really, really fascinating technology. And taking that sort of first draft, moving that over into ChatGPT, getting it to check Claude's work, checking that it wasn't making any overclaims, and going backwards and forwards until both of them could agree that the claims were correct and that they weren't overstating any of the claims that were made based on the context. And then finally getting one of them to create a table that would allow you to see, this is the claim that's made. Where is it in the document? Where is the source for that coming from? And being able to take that and then use that as the final human check in that loop. So being able to get the two different AI models in two different projects, but with the same context, to check each other's work, make sure that they were actually being accurate and not overstating or being too sycophantic, and then actually getting them to provide that in a really easy way for us to check our work, to try to avoid the challenge of hallucinations, which are so important to avoid, when we're working in regulated industries.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I think that's a really important point there. I'd like to sort of pivot a little bit and have you explain to the audience what synthetic customers are and maybe provide an example of how it can be used in our industry.
Yeah, so many people will sort of know, sort of looking at prompt engineering, and very often, you start off by defining the role of an organization, of what the role the AI is playing. So operate as a whatever it is. That's fine. It works on what's within the language model. What we've been doing is going from, this journey started off looking at, well, what happens if I put a persona document that's been created into a custom GPT or, a project or a skill, and interact with it that way. But those persona documents are usually pretty thin. They don't have a lot of context. So then what can I do to build context that really helps me model what a customer actually will say? And so there's been a number of different ways we approach this. Some is using what's publicly available. So looking at LinkedIn profiles, what people are saying online, and building them out based on what, a best guess of who those customers are, which is very often the way that personas are built by agencies anyway. Or what I prefer to do is to take all of that voice of customer, all of that internal information that we have, and build out really, really, really rich context around what these customers might think, say, and do, what jobs have to be done for them, what's important to them when they're making decisions, and really building that up. And so some of the work we've been doing, might span across a decade of voice of customer research into a certain application area, and really being able to give you really good insight into what customers are thinking, what they're saying, what their preferences are, both on a brand level in terms of what in terms of what makes them make a decision. And that's been really, really exciting to do. That's being used to help improve decision making in product development. But that same kind of process can then flow into helping marketing teams make better decisions about how to position products, how to know which messages to lead with, all the way through to then helping sales teams to prepare for sales calls because they know that they're meeting somebody of a certain type of persona. So these are the types of things to ask. And of course, you can get even more granular, and then sort of on top of that, that sort of synthetic customer approach, and sort of, which is, I'd say, is more at the sort of the archetype or persona level, then move into the next level of then, well, what does that mean from that individual and their personality type, and how do I take that a step further as well? So there's a whole range of really being able to build the context around the customer. And the whole point of this is that really just trying to help put the customer at the center of every single decision that's made, from product development all the way through to, to sales conversations. That's kind of why we exist.
It's real life customer centricity from potentially the start of a new product all the way through to end of life of a product and marketing that product. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you don't, even if you don't have, tons of voice of customer, the difference it makes by being able to build a lot of context out about what your customers are thinking and saying makes a huge difference in the sorts of responses that you get from the AI. As Nick said, it's all about building that really intelligent context engineering about what are you trying to achieve.
So on that point of context, Nick, we have a question from our audience for you. How do you identify which contacts in that 100,000 person database are entering an active buying cycle before they self-identify?
Um, that's a difficult one because, well, if you've got 100,000 people database, the the stats show at the moment 3 to 5% of that are ready to buy. That's the sort of like industry agnostic percentage of people that are actually ready to buy. The rest are in your awareness phase, and you've got to make sure they're thinking of you next. How do you identify them? You've got to start looking for signals. And often people get really caught up in, well, if they're doing this very specific niche assay, they are ready for me, and I know they will be. Where are you finding that information? So the way I like to think about looking for buying signals and looking for persona signals is, if I was to sit on my laptop now and go to LinkedIn or go to any lead list building tool and look for something, a piece of data, if I can find it on my own one-to-one, I can find it for a list of 100,000 people now and do that at scale. So as an example, there are very few people that go to their LinkedIn profile and say they are doing this niche experiment and they are ready to purchase now. That's not a signal you can find. However, if you're a recruiter, for example, and somebody's just put open to work, that's a signal we can see on their LinkedIn. So we should be monitoring that, right? So it very, very different phases. So for us in what we do, we're often looking for job changes. We're looking for funding. These are available. FDA announcements, FDA failure letters, signals for site moves if you're selling equipment, and you can look for Google News resources, you can look for LinkedIn posts, you can look for accredited places like the FDA. But if the information isn't publicly available, it's very difficult to find at scale. But if you can find it one-on-one, you can find it at scale and make your job easier. That's how I tend to look for signals and how to look for readiness to purchase. Yeah, I think that's the best approach at the moment.
Have you found like tools like Reddit and the subreddits like Lab to be helpful in that signal?
Well, to be honest, if you're going to look at subreddits, you can probably just use Claude or GPT, because I think there's a huge percentage of their data comes from Reddit. I think number 2 is LinkedIn. So it's actually quite a good resource to look for those signals if you can get the trained correctly on how to frame that, because there's a lot of data out there. But Reddit doesn't have a huge amount of lab forum spaces. I'll be honest, there's not a huge amount there at the moment. Other places though are in like forums on LinkedIn, so where you opt in to be in a user group. They're great places. I can give specific examples for specific products, but yeah, there's a lot of different places you can look.
Yeah, perfect. Sarah, you sort of have a very different angle to most of us in marketing in the life sciences, as you work at the intersection of word of mouth marketing and AI discoverability. How is AI changing the way brands get found and evaluated before a buyer ever speaks to anyone? And what should commercial teams be doing right now to make sure they're part of that conversation?
Absolutely. That's a great question. And I'll build on the word that Nick used, signals. I think it is important that any team, commercial teams, consumer goods teams, are thinking about their buyers' journeys and the ways in which a potential customer signals their interest. What are the questions that they're asking? What is the research that they're doing? Who are the colleagues that they're talking to before they make that purchase decision? And all of those questions and thoughts can then be translated into creating digital footprints that are visible to AI. Because I may ask my colleague for a recommendation today, and then I will likely validate that with AI tomorrow. So let's make sure that those human conversations are being reflected in a way that is visible to AI. If a buyer is asking a certain question you frequently get, making sure that that is as simple as including that in your FAQs, and that your FAQs on your website are built in a way that is easily accessible to AI. And oftentimes in a more detailed way than a human consumer might ask the question, or that you might, as a company, choose to answer that question digitally. So making sure that those signals are available. But also, we want to make sure that you're creating opportunities for new information to be shared, so that if someone is curious, or if AI is looking for an answer to the question about what you do as an organization, that there is current information available that matches the information that your customers are looking for. And that's a work for, your content team, your PR team, because all of those things that create human conversation, having the great experience at a conference or an industry event, take those same tools that you would use to build conversation and curiosity for your human customers, and make sure that that content is showing up in a way that's visible for AI.
Super.
I was looking into that a little bit recently, actually, and it shocked me when I found out that exactly what you said I completely agree with. But what shocked me was the time frames in which AI is searching for this data. And what I was reading was telling us that the majority of sources cited are from no more than 13 weeks ago. And actually, you are 3 times more likely to have your content referenced to answer a question if it's less than 30 days old. So it's you have to keep refreshing things and making sure you've got something active all of the time now. It's less about keywords and more about answering questions and doing it in recent times, from what I'm learning. Sarah, you'll know more than me in that phase, but
Absolutely. And that's exciting. So you want to make sure that it is current, interesting, relevant information, and that it is clearly time stamped, so that AI is able to tell that it's fresh news. But what's exciting is that word of mouth takes time. Human conversations take time to build momentum. And what Nick was talking about is that window is really quick to be able to see results. So if you are packaging your data in a way that is visible to AI, and you're creating something interesting for humans and sharing it with quickness, you will be able to see the results in how AI is talking about your brand, your product, your service, um, more quickly than we might expect. And to me, that's very exciting, because that means that we have agency in this crazy robot world, to tell our stories in the way that we want to tell them.
Absolutely. That recency bias is really key. We recently built some synthetic customers, and we use a lot of deep research to look into what are the questions that people are currently asking online about the topic of interest. And then when you go through and you put those FAQs together and you put that rich information on a page, and you've got all the schema markup right. So we recently built a microsite for somebody that's in the middle of upgrading their website. So the microsite was kind of a stepping stone. And within a week, those answers were appearing in sort of the Google AI results, in sort of their answer engine. Does it stay there? Probably not. As again, you've got that recency bias, but it goes to show that if you're creating content and you're answering the questions that people are asking, it really gives you a boost. It does also make me wonder whether marketing teams will start having essentially an agentic auto update on a page that updates timestamps, edits a few words, and keeps playing the AI recency bias at their own game. So you can see that these things are likely to happen in a loop, a bit like the old days of Google, where there was constantly a game to be optimized. The things settled down. I wonder when we're going to hit that with AI.
It reminds me of the days of Twitter, when you had a Twitter feed on your website in order to create current and up-to-date content, because it was easier to do Twitter updates and get those loaded into your website to help with your SEO.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a comment and a question from Heather to all of you. I think we're raising the level playing field. We all have access to amazing tools to make work products even better. I've noticed that AI has made everything possible to go from 0 to 80%, but last 20% comes with niche and deep understanding per customer. So I think she's getting at the heart of the what a lot of people are calling AI slop versus real quality content. Are you seeing and experiencing the same? And I'll take it one step further. How do you mitigate against that slop?
Sorry, Anne,
Sorry.
please go first.
For me, in my world, we have brand guidelines. We always have done. And those guidelines are now extending into the AI world. So we have artifacts that allow our teams to put the content through and get it checked. In the old days, I used to work for IBM 25 years ago. We used to have a team of about 12 people in Paris who would check all our content to make sure it was on brand before it went out into the big wide world. But they got rid of those probably 10 years ago. And now AI is giving the opportunity for individuals across the organization to create a wide range of content and mini programs, etc. But then it's also allowing us to police it much easier and make sure that what's going out. It was actually quite funny today because a colleague had received some content from one of our customers, and she said it was almost like it was built for Promega, and she could tell that it had been built in ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude. And what she was trying to say was that a lot of the content that is now coming through, there is no differentiator. The brand isn't there. One thing at Promega is we have a fantastic brand persona and tone and image. I would not want to lose that for the sake of giving AI tools to individuals that probably shouldn't have them.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, I think there's a couple of things. Absolutely, we can use AI to help us from creating AI slop, or at least signaling it's AI slop. So a great hack I've been using is to go to the Wikipedia page that talks about AI slop and all the AI signals, and then you rip all the telltale signs off of that, then create a skill or a check custom GPT or some kind of automated function that allows you to then check that you're not actually slipping into the tails of AI created content. So there's some fun things there. But I think we're hitting on a bigger point here, and Anne, I love the fact you're talking about brand and how that is something to treasure now more than ever, and I think we have to really protect that. I think for many of us, what that leads to is the need for organizations to adopt more of a trust portfolio approach, something I learned when I was at the Uprising. Apparently it's a concept that's been around a while, but it was new to me. And well, that's really where you have organizations actually using their people, their employees, their teams to build their personal brands. And I think if we think of organizations as media companies, many of the news sites, for example, people don't follow the news, they follow the individual reporters. Mm. And so can we turn our scientists, can we train and enable our scientists, our sales teams, our marketers, the right people, the people that actually have the desire to get out there and tell the messages for us on about our companies, and tell the real human stories about, maybe it's engaging with customers in the field from our field application scientists, maybe it's R&D telling their stories, obviously making sure they're not giving away any critical IP secrets, but can we actually enable our teams to actually become mini voices for the brand as well? And I think that's something that's going to become increasingly important as we go through this AI era.
I completely
I also,
agree. Our staff are our champions. And that's where Sarah comes in, because that's where word of mouth, because as marketers, that is the most cost effective form of marketing for us. If we were back in a village 100 years ago, the trades in that village were dictated by how happy the local customers were. We're now having to do that on a global scale. We're having to use tools that can get that message out as quickly and as simply as possible. Sorry, Nick, I interrupted you.
It's fine. I think when it comes to brand marketing, sales, or to be honest, anything you're going to use AI for, there's two things I always keep in mind is that you need great people to run it, analyze it, QC it. And if you don't have those great people, you will put out rubbish. And the other thing is, someone once told me, treat AI like a genius intern idiot. And if you do that, you'll realize that how you're functioning with it. You would never take your intern, no matter how smart they are, because they don't have the knowledge you have or the context, and ask them to run your company. And it should be the same for AI. Whatever your company is, like whether that's your department, your role, whatever, you are in charge of it and need to stay in command of it. And you can use as many AI tools and agents as you like, but you need you and your team to manage it. So we call it people in the loop.
Absolutely. I wanted to chime in. Everyone has said this phrase of human in the loop, and even thinking of it as a human sandwich with the AI in the middle, because all of us, and I would imagine everyone that is on this call, have deep expertise in our area of focus. And we are able to use that to discern the quality of and context of the material that's being created by AI. And if we don't use that discernment, what comes out is rubbish or slop. But if we use our experience that has been built over our decades in whatever industry we're in, we are able to spot the moments of genius as well as the moments of idiot intern, and filter so that what we share with a wider audience does align with the brand voice and the brand guidelines, as Anne was saying. So all of the folks that are on the panel, we're using AI every day in so many ways, as we've all discussed. Every single time, it is in at least speaking for myself, it is then reviewed and edited and checked by me and my human brain to make sure that it meets the needs that I have for whatever that particular project is.
Yeah, well said, Sarah. I think there's both the formal way of doing that review, in part using tools like the brand guidelines that Anne mentioned, like definitions of AI slop, like Matt mentioned. And then there's the human lived experience part of the human in the loop. And I think both of those represent that 20% that Heather had mentioned of really reviewing and having a deep understanding of your market and your customer to make sure that AI slop doesn't leak through.
Yeah, I think, just to add to that, I think it's really important that we realize that we may use AI as a tool to help us create things. But if we pass that on internally, if we pass that on externally, it's our reputations that are on the line, our our individual reputations on the line. Yeah. And of course, that cascades up to the company brand as well. But you wouldn't want to end up in a situation where, just imagine that you're a solicitor or lawyer, depending on where you are, and you've done some research using an AI, and all of a sudden you use that to invent, it hallucinates some case law, and all of a sudden you end up in court and the case law is found to have been hallucinated. That's happened on both sides of the pond. and it's really embarrassing. It causes a lot of issues. So these sort of hallucinations, this sloppy use of AI, which causes AI slop, whether that's external or work slop, it destroys careers. And so I think we have to be really, really careful to make sure that we're not just going, right, I can do this really quickly. Yes, we can do it quickly, but we then also need to then be able to play the editor. I like to think of it as being able to, I can still be the composer, but in the middle, I don't have to learn to play every single instrument, but I still have to be the conductor and the sound engineer. And I think that, because at the end of the day, I'm responsible for whatever CD or tune goes out. I might use AI in numerous places, but I'm still responsible. I still stamp my name and my reputation on what I put out into the world.
One thing that really does worry me, and this is somebody who's in the latter years of their career and who's been around for a long time and who has early 20-something kids and very much have been in the teaching space over the last 25 years, is how do you get to that editor role? And that's really, for me, quite concerning, because I was at a Martech event probably about 4 years ago now, really big meeting. There were about 200 people in the audience, and there was a very cocky 20-something who said to the old-fashioned ad man, well, mate, your job's going to be out the window now. AI is going to replace you. And fair play to him. He sat back with that 40 years of knowledge and said, well, it could do, he said, because we're already using AI. He said, but what it won't do is come up with the proposition. It won't come up with the big idea at the moment. But what it will do is it will create the website, the advert, the PR, the packaging. But that used to be me 30, 40 years ago doing that. And that's how I learned my craft. And now I'm the head of a big ad agency. And that is what concerns me about the future in my mother teacher role, is how do we get the youngsters to be the people we are now, when AI will probably take over a lot of that apprenticeship role. And that is a genuine concern for me.
Agree. That is a concern for me. I've had that conversation many times. How will people earn the experience that gives them the ability to discern what's good, what's doesn't make any sense? As a mom and as a business person, it's going to be a wild ride.
I'm slightly more optimistic than both of you. So I actually think that, well, I read, what made me optimistic is a while ago, there was an article that showed newspaper headlines over the last 100 years. Every time there was an invention of something cool, like the printing press, the cotton loom, like agricultural revolution. And every time it said, this is the end of jobs. And every time humans found a way to have jobs within that structure. So I just think we're going to need more senior people. So those senior people, if they really want to retire and keep their dividends, are going to have to find somebody and train that person to replace them so they can take their dividends in their company while somebody else runs it. And we're going to need a conveyor belt, for want of a better word, of new people to do that. So I think there will be a short-term pain before everybody more senior starts to feel that pain and solves it, because we need that. We still need that supply of good people.
I'm with you on that, Nick. I mean, I think that there's a big concern, but humans always find a way, and we know that we desperately need purpose as human beings, and we will find a way to get purpose out of our roles. But I do think that one of the big challenges we're going to face is that the nature of every job role, if you will, a number of those tasks will change and they'll be taken away. And, we'll be offloading some things to AI, and that's going to cause shifts across, every industry. And what I think we're going to need to do is to look at how do we then train students and youngsters to be able to adapt and gain that experience. And I think that's something that we're going to have to really focus on, and it's going to be a big push. So there could be some temporary pain. And I probably feel most sorry for the students that were going through university or education at the time where the university systems were kind of saying AI is bad, we can't use it, but they're coming into a workforce where the AI is being used. And so that gap, I think, is the big one. One education system or the universities that I speak and teach with, they're now adopting AI. They're teaching AI, maybe not as much as some organizations are, but at least they're becoming familiar with it. And so as that journey happens, we will prepare the workforce, but I think there's going to be a gap where we're going to probably need to do some remedial training. And the sad thing is that I think many of those students have also been hit by the likes of COVID. And so I think that we're going to have a group of folks that I feel really sorry for, that I think we're going to need to embrace and really look to see how can we help them into the workforce and through it.
Yeah, I think we could have a whole conversation on this topic. I agree with everybody. It's a balance between teaching the theory, teaching how to use AI responsibly, embedding AI in your workflows, and getting out and having real world experiences with people, whether it's at conferences, whether it's at networking events, and combining those two together so you can use AI responsibly while keeping the human in the loop and having experiences on which to judge the AI output. So I want to end our conversation here with a question from one of the audience members who is asking, if everyone is playing around and experimenting with AI, how do you come to an overall strategy, consistency, and quality? And maybe we'll start with you, Anne.
Okay, so our strategy for AI since we implemented it was to give our people an amount of time, and that's down to individual branches and individual managers. For me and my team, I had to give them more time for learning, because I would go back to marketing being one of the fastest moving careers. I used to say it to my students when I was a university lecturer: welcome to one of the fastest moving careers in the planet, because it changes so often. We had PPC, we had SEO, digital videos going onto website. Every 6 months something changed, and you just have to build that into your process and your management of people. And then what we do is we work with those solution providers. So both OpenAI and Claude have seen the opportunity of us as a business. And more recently, I've worked with Asana and a couple of sales enablement tools, because they know that if we're happy customers using their tools, we will talk about it. It comes back to Sarah and her word of mouth. So we will be good proponents of those tools. And importantly, our business objectives are that we will increase sales, increase number of inquiries, all the key metrics that you have, but AI will be embedded into that. And we will have employee satisfaction too.
Sarah, what do you think?
I agree with what Anne's said, that everyone learns at a different pace, and we need to make sure that folks have the time to get comfortable with the new tools. I think the goal for me when I say play around, get in there, try it, is to reduce the discomfort, the fear factor. As Matt referenced, there was a chunk of time when people were saying, no, AI is too risky, or it's, cheating in some way, don't do it. And we're well past that time. So get in, get comfortable with the tools. If you are, teaching yourself to cook, you have to understand the ingredients and the different tools that you have in your kitchen. And maybe your goal isn't to become a gourmet chef, but to understand the work that's going into creating a meal. And that's how I think about an overall strategy or consistency, is that you don't need everyone to be able to work to the level of quality that your end result will be, the events or marketing content that you're sharing. But you do need everyone to understand the elements that are going into that work. And then the consistency and the quality lives with whoever is managing that output, whatever the source of that output. Anne referenced the brand guidelines earlier, that what we need is for our teams to understand how these tools can improve their workflow, their efficiency, their creativity, and the strategy and consistency comes from leadership understanding those tools as well and making sure that the output is meeting the standards of wherever that output is going to live and whatever audience is going to access it.
Nice. Nick, what are your thoughts?
Um, the keeping up with the tools or playing around, I think, is a necessity if you want to be ahead of the curve in this. I am not a tech geek at heart. I knew pretty much nothing about any programming language at all ever 3 years ago. But sort of threw myself into it out of curiosity and just keep playing around. And luckily, I have a brain that chases squirrels, as we like to say, like just completely distracted, which is great for trying new things. Um, but when you find something good that works, I think you need to make sure you have an end goal for why you're using it and make sure you approach that scientifically and fully test it. And then when you've fully tested it, you embed it in your process. But that's an iterative cycle. So I'm already thinking about switching from Claude to Codex because I've seen some stuff I prefer in Codex, right? So I'm currently testing Codex, running the same things in parallel I would in Claude. And I think these things are important. One quote I heard from, actually my co-founder says it a lot, but it's basically, it's a full-time job trying to keep up with AI. I need to quit work to do so, right? But I just think you need that level of curiosity, but have in mind the end goal of what you want that tool to do and test it thoroughly like you would any scientific experiment before you jettison it. And then you're going to go back into that iterative cycle. One thing I think is dangerous, and we've probably made that mistake a bit internally, is getting so excited by the new tool and throwing it over the fence to your team that they're constantly on a learning curve and never actually fully becoming comfortable with the process. So that's one thing I'd warn against, because like there'll be a new tool in 2 days' time that we could use.
I think that's an important message. And Matt, we'll leave you with the last word.
Wow, that's a lot of responsibility. And so maybe it's time for me to call on John Cleese, who, when he talks about creativity, and, there's a time for, if creativity has these two parts, this part for play, which I think we've all talked about, that ability to dig in, just explore what the tools, what the tools can do. But then there's that part for disciplined creation, for actually the disciplined search of how can I apply this? And more importantly, how can I apply this to achieve what our customers need, what our business strategy needs? And so bringing it back to, I think our leaders needing to be really clear at articulating what is our strategy for our customers, for our business, so that we can know how we can make sure that what we discover when we're playing with these tools can actually align and help support that organizational mission. And that's something that I find really, it is a challenge. It means that, now that I can create 24/7, I kind of want to be creating 24/7. That's a challenge. It's probably why I'm sleep deprived. But I do think that it's really important that we set aside time for play and then set aside disciplined time for actually the creation of, or the creation of what is needed for the business. And those two, having those two hand in hand is going to be a key skill for everybody going forward.
This has been an amazing discussion. Thank you all, Anne, Nick, Matt, and Sarah. I really appreciate your insights, and on behalf of our audience and the SAMPS community, thank you for sharing your experiences, both hard-earned as well as creative and pleasurable. And thank you to our audience for attending today. I'd like to invite anybody who hasn't had a chance to ask a question or who is listening to this webinar on the archived version. If you have any questions, please send them to SAMPS, and we will be happy to distribute it to the panel to get an answer. Thanks again, everybody. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.